Hey guys, welcome back to another vlog. Today I'm actually trying out a different form of AI technology. It's called monologue.so, and it basically generates questions and interacts with you like a podcaster would. So I'm basically being interviewed by a computer in this episode. So let's take a look and see how it goes.
In today's conversation, we're diving into the enriching yet challenging journey of teaching English in Riyadh. Our guest, an American expat with over a decade of experience living and working abroad, shares insights from a career that spans the globe, including time spent in the US, Malaysia, and now Saudi Arabia. We will explore the motivations, challenges, and personal growth that come with teaching in different cultural settings. So, let's start from the beginning. What motivated you to start teaching abroad?
Well, really, I was a bit tired of working many jobs in the United States, and I wanted to live in a place that was more comfortable for me to work and live as a Muslim, as well as to be able to actually start saving money as opposed to living paycheck to paycheck. Although I had a great upbringing and I was able to get an education, life in the U.S. became increasingly difficult. So I felt like I wanted to get out and really taste the world and live in a Muslim country. That was my primary motivation.
That's a powerful story, and it's clear that your desire for a more fulfilling life and a stronger connection to your faith played a big role in your decision. So, you were looking for a place where you could feel more at home culturally and financially, and Riyadh seemed like a good fit. Let's dive into that a bit more. How does teaching in Riyadh compare to your experiences in the US and Malaysia, both in terms of the culture and the work environment?
So, I mean, in the U.S., um, you're always going to have international students, right? But in the United States, the classrooms are a lot more mixed, and I feel like that's more conducive to a learning environment for English language learners. For example, you can pair students from Arabic-speaking backgrounds to students from, let's say, Chinese or any other kind of any other kind of language background, and that forces them then to use English to communicate and work as teams. And the one of the challenges that you find in a place that's more monolingual, like here in Saudi Arabia, is that if everybody speaks the same language, people oftentimes revert to their mother language to explain what's going on, and then they try to use what they're learning in English from that point onwards. So I don't know. I think that's like one of the biggest differences. Also, I mean, the strictness in terms of in the United States, like you can't be late like more than four times without it being considered an absence, and by late, it's like more than 5 minutes late at the place where I work. Um, so that's a big difference between here and there. Here, it's a
That's a
lot
really
more
interesting
relaxed.
point about the reliance on the native language. It sounds like it can create a bit of a barrier for English language learners. Could you give us a specific example of how that plays out in the classroom? Maybe it's
Sure. So I mean,
Let's go ahead and
go
hear
ahead.
that example then. I'm curious to see how that Okay,
Sure.
great. Let's hear about that example then. It sounds like it will help our viewers understand the challenge you're describing.
Sure. So I mean, any kind of team assignment, like let's say that you have a task in terms of even just correcting errors of a sentence on the board. If you pair up people or set them in groups of three, if they all speak the same language, instead of trying to explain what the problem is to each other in English, they'll revert to their mother tongue, whether that's Chinese, Arabic, Korean, or whatever. Whereas if when you're in the United States and you have like a multilingual setting, you've got students from around the world, the teachers can then strategically pair people together that don't speak a common language and force them to use the language that they're learning in the classroom, which is English.
That's a great example, and it really brings that challenge to life. It sounds like the students are almost taking a shortcut by using their native language. So, how do you address that in your classroom? Do you have any strategies for encouraging them to stick to English?
It's quite difficult. It depends on where you're working here. Um, at the early stages of learning the language, I'm a little bit more flexible with that because I want to make sure that they're able to grasp, all of the material. But as we move along, it's just me basically trying to be a little bit of a tough teacher in enforcing an English only policy during test taking
Let's shift
when
gears a
it comes.
bit. How has living abroad changed your perspective on home?
My perspective on living on home, I don't consider living at home anymore, I guess. I feel like home is where the heart is, and wherever I'm working and wherever I'm with my family is where I consider to be home. Where I grew up, it's a nice place, but there's not a lot there right now, and there are quite few jobs available. There aren't that many jobs available, especially for those involved in the field of education, which I am. So basically, I'm happy where I am here, and I don't really think of home too often. I watch the news
Okay,
sometimes
it
because
sounds like
of
you've
it, really.
fully embraced your new life abroad. That's really interesting that you don't think about home very often. It's a big shift to make to leave everything you know behind. Do you think that's because you've found a sense of belonging where you are now? Or is there something else at play?
Not really. I feel like I mean, I don't focus on home too much, so it's something that I never really consider. Like I said just a moment ago, home is really where the heart is, so
That's a
I brought
beautiful.
my home with me. I'm not really seeking a sense of belonging. I just want to feel comfortable, if that makes sense. I don't want to be scrutinized
That
for
makes
the
a
way
lot
I
of
do
sense.
things.
It sounds like you've created a comfortable and fulfilling life for yourself abroad. It's great that you've found a place where you can be yourself without feeling judged. Okay, no problem. Let's shift gears then. To keep things engaging for our viewers, how about we dive into a specific career path? For example, what are the opportunities for someone in the technology field in each country? We could then compare the potential for growth and salary expectations in Riyadh, Najran, and Kuala Lumpur. What do you think? Ooh,
I'm not familiar with that. Actually, I work in the field of education, and I've worked as an academic director. I've worked as an educational consultant, and right now I'm currently working as an English teacher, so I can talk about those things.
that's great. It's always good to focus on areas you have direct experience in. Let's dive into the world of education then. To start, could you tell me what would be the biggest difference for an educator working in Kuala Lumpur versus Riyadh? Think about the day to day experience, the teaching environment, and the overall cultural context.
Sure. I mean, teachers in Kuala Lumpur versus Riyadh are basically required to do a lot more at work than they are here in Riyadh. They have a lot more tasks and duties to fulfill, and they have a lot of work that they have to bring home with them. In terms of working inside the classroom in Kuala Lumpur, you're going to have a lot more international students. A lot of students come from China. You have a handful of students from Korea, students from Iraq, Libya, Iran, students from Saudi Arabia are there as well. So it's a very, very mixed classroom. Primarily, students are coming from China, though. Here in Saudi Arabia, the student body is made up of almost entirely Saudi students. We do also have Yemeni students and Syrian students. Those are the big three that I deal with on a daily basis. In terms of the workplace in Saudi Arabia, it's a lot more relaxed. That's at least been my experience. It's a lot more relaxed
That's a
than.
really insightful point about the workload. It sounds like there's a stark contrast between the two. For our viewers, it's helpful to have a specific example. Could you share a story about a task or responsibility that you've encountered in Kuala Lumpur that you wouldn't have experienced in Riyadh? A real life example will make this difference much clearer.
Sure, sure, yeah. Working in Malaysia, it required me basically at the end of every month to spend an entire night finalizing grades, printing certificates with my staff, working with teachers to finalize grades on exams and having them cross-checked. Sometimes that work would be concluded at like 11 p.m., sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning. It just depended on how many students we had. So that's something that I didn't experience
That's a
here in
great
Saudi Arabia.
example. It really paints a picture of the difference in workload. You mentioned that the experience in Saudi Arabia is more relaxed. Could you elaborate on that a bit? What specifically makes it more relaxed compared to Malaysia? Is it the pace of work, the expectations, or
I, I think it's a pace of work, and it's also like if you and your colleagues are working together as one, as a team, and you work together, following the chain of
it's
command with your management, then a system of trust is established, and with that system of trust, you're able to work
that's
effectively
a
in the
really
classroom. When you can work effectively in the classroom, you're able to basically, conduct your classes and finish your classes. And when you're done with your classes, and I don't mean to cut you off, when you're done with your classes are finished. You don't have to bring
That's a great
anything home
point.
with
It
you.
sounds like in Saudi Arabia there's more of a focus on work-life balance. That's definitely something our viewers would want to know.
So you guys can see that I've changed environments. Obviously, I changed environments halfway through, and the interview wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. Only because, for whatever reason, no matter which internet I use, whether at a cafe or with my personal connection, I get disconnected. So that's quite of a bit of a challenge. Also, I found that the interviewer was kind of interrupting quite often, and there wasn't a natural feel to it. But what did you guys think? Please let me know in the comment section below. Bye bye. Assalamu alaikum.